The message arrived on Friday at 2:47 p.m. I sat at the table, staring at the seating chart. 700 guests, 40 tables, 2 governors, 3 senators, a lieutenant governor. A gala in support of a children's hospital, my brainchild, the event of the year, 9 months in the making. The air in the office was thick with responsibility, and a cold autumn rain poured outside. Then my phone vibrated. The number was unfamiliar, but I recognized the style at first glance. Dry as a twig, colorless. "Don't come to the family reunion tomorrow. Maria has a new boyfriend, State Senator Richard Brennan. We need to impress him. Your work at the nonprofit will only complicate things. I hope you understand, Dad." Everything froze. The sound of the rain outside, the ticking of the clock on the wall, everything compressed into one dense, stifling silence. 12 years. For 12 years, I'd been dragging my organization out of oblivion, turning it into a force to be reckoned with. But in my father's eyes, I remained a girl with a collection cup. It didn't hurt. It was just devastating, down to the very core. I wasn't angry. I was tired. So tired that my fingers typed, "Okay," and sent it. Oh, what they didn't know. What they didn't even bother to ask. Senator Richard Brennan was the keynote speaker at my gala, that same night, at the same country club, and his place was reserved for him, not just anywhere, but at my honor table. The irony of fate burned with a bitter, almost poisonous sweetness. In the Torres family, being average is being a shadow. Maria is always the sun. Prom queen since first grade with perfect curls and a smile that drives boys crazy. Her life is a glittering string of victories and high-profile romances. Carlos is our pride, our athlete. His future shone like a baseball under the stadium lights. And me? Sophia, the thinker. That's how I was introduced to guests, with the condescending tone one uses to describe an old but serviceable vacuum cleaner. Not exactly beautiful, but it works. At 16, I dared to mention my dream at dinner, to defend children's rights. Dad snorted. "You won't make money that way, mija." Maria, without looking up from her manicure, would say, "Marrying well, that's your best foundation." That evening, something inside me broke and immediately hardened, turning to steel. I stopped sharing. I started simply doing. Volunteering in the oncology ward of a children's hospital became my lifeblood. There, among brave little ones and exhausted parents, I found my calling. I remember one mother, her eyes like pools of despair, grabbing my hands. "You saved us," she whispered. Her gratitude burned my palm. Then I realized this was my path, my only true path. I was exhausted. A double major, 3 jobs, dreams filled with statistics and legal paragraphs. "You'll manage somehow," my father said when I asked for help with my studies. I managed, on my own, with honors. My first salary from a tiny human rights firm, $31,000 a year, elicited only a polite, dull sweetheart from my family, as if I'd shown them another failed drawing from kindergarten. But they didn't see the plan, the strategic plan brewing in my head. They didn't see how, at night, in a tiny apartment, I wrote my first grant. 6 weeks between midnight and 4 in the morning. Noodles for dinner, a 12-year-old Honda, the entire world compressed to the size of a laptop screen. And I won it. $50,000. That's how it all started. My organization, Chan, was growing like a living, breathing creature. 15 employees, a $2 million budget, 800 families saved. They still said, "That's sweet." They only noticed my new dress and asked if I'd been promoted at my office. I smiled. I remained silent. Why explain? They wouldn't listen. By 27, Chan was already an empire of charity. 43 employees, millions in the budget, thousands of families whose hope we'd restored. I was buying a townhouse, mortgage-free. But at family dinners, we still discussed Maria's new boyfriend's Porsche and Carlos's television successes. And then there was Senator Richard Brennan, our ally, the man with whom I pushed through the legislation to forgive children's medical debt. We drank 15 cups of coffee together, held dozens of meetings. He respected me. He saw strength in me. To him, I was Sophia Torres, an expert, a leader, a partner. But to my own family, at that very moment, I was just a potential liability, the stigma of a poor relative from charity work, someone who needed to be hidden so as not to embarrass our important new son-in-law. I remember that call 6 months ago. His aide, his voice impeccably polite. Senator Brennan highly appreciates the work of Chan. He would be honored to speak at your gala. My breath caught in my throat. It wasn't just luck, it was recognition. His name lent weight and authority to the event, opening doors to the most generous donors. That entire evening was our painstaking masterpiece. 4.2 million last year, a figure that still makes my head spin. This year, we were aiming for 6. I knew every name on the 700 guest list, every menu preference, every seat at the table. For 3 weeks, like a military commander, I arranged the pieces on this velvet and crystal chessboard. And Senator Brennan was our queen, the guest of honor at the head table. And yesterday, this perfectly constructed world cracked. My father's message. Every word was like a slap in the face. Complicates. I reread it until the letters swam before my eyes. My life, my business, everything I'd poured my soul into, mere complications for their latest spectacle. James, my deputy, my friend, laughed into the phone when it all became clear. His laughter was a bitter balm. The universe will put everything in its place, he said, and I decided to let it. For 12 years I was hidden. Today, I will not hide. The hall was aglow. White roses, flickering candles, a quiet hum of anticipation. And nearby, behind the wall, were colorful balloons and the Torres family banner. 2 worlds separated by a thin partition. My dress, dark blue like the night before dawn, lay perfectly. It was my armor. And so I was already greeting the first guests when I heard them. My mother's voice, full of feigned delight. Maria's voice, choked with tension. Don't embarrass me. A poignant, painfully familiar melody. I stepped back into the shadow of the column, allowing them to pass. He arrived precisely at 6:30. Senator Brennan. His handshake was firm, his gaze warm and businesslike. You've outdone yourself, Sophia. My name sounded like a title on his lips. He said he was nervous. This powerful man confided his worries to me. And then, slightly embarrassed, he mentioned the girl he'd brought with him. She's somewhere here, with her family. They're having a meeting. Take your time, I said, my voice as calm as the surface of a lake. You still have time. I watched him go into the hall in search of someone. A deep breath. The scent of roses and cooked food. My pulse pounded steadily in my temples. By 6:45, the hall was filled to the brim. The air hummed with low, businesslike voices, the tinkling of crystal, the rustling of silk. I shook hands, smiled, and caught admiring glances at our logo. This was my world, and I ruled it. At 6:55 p.m., the coordinator caught my eye and held up 5 fingers. 5 minutes. I took my place at the head of the table. My heart was no longer pounding anxiously, but powerfully and solemnly. And then, at 6:59 p.m., the heavy doors swung open for the last guests, and I saw them. Senator Brennan entered, arm in arm with Maria. She was dazzling in scarlet, like victory. Her smile was wide and slightly nervous. She looked at him, beaming, oblivious to everything around her. And he led her across the room, through a sea of influential people, through the center of the universe I had built, straight to our table, to my table. She hadn't seen me yet. Her gaze slid over the lieutenant governor, over the famous faces, and triumph was evident in her eyes. She held the senator's arm like a trophy. They came closer, a few more steps. I didn't lower my eyes. I waited. I waited for that moment when her gaze would meet mine and her perfectly orchestrated moment of triumph would collapse in the silence of this shining hall. They approached, and it seemed as if all the sounds in the room had faded. Maria glowed, her hand on the senator's sleeve like a sign of ownership. They approached the table, and the coordinator nodded politely, checking their seats. Richard Brennan, a gentleman to the fingertips, pulled out a chair for my sister, and at that moment, his gaze fell on the name card lying to the left of his plate. Sophia Torres, Executive Director, CHAN. He froze. Slowly, as if in a bad dream, he looked up and saw me, sitting at the head of the table, the owner of this evening. All the color drained from his face. "Sophia," he breathed out, his voice breaking into a croak. You are Sophia Torres?" Maria turned sharply, her gaze locked with mine, and I saw her wide-open eyes instantly change from astonishment to incomprehension to bone-chilling horror. Her lips trembled silently. "Good evening, Senator Brennan." My voice was even and clear, cutting through the tension. "Maria, how good to see you. I didn't expect you to be our special guest." "You?" Her whisper was barely audible. "Is this all yours?" "I founded this organization 12 years ago," I retorted easily, gesturing to the glittering hall. "Welcome to our flagship fundraising gala. Tonight, we hope to reach the $6 million goal for seriously ill children." Senator Brennan sank heavily into his chair, unable to take his shocked gaze from me. "Maria, your sister, that Sophia Torres? The author of the medical debt law. I had no idea." Maria's eyes darted around like a cornered animal, seeking salvation that wasn't there. "Is everything all right, Sophia?" the vice governor asked quietly, leaning toward me. "Absolutely," I smiled, and the smile was icy. "It's just that the family reunion was a bit unexpected. How are you, Maria?" She couldn't utter a word. Shadows flitted across the senator's face. Shock, surmise, growing, uncontrollable indignation. "You told me," his voice sharpened, addressing Maria, "that your sister works for a small charity, that she has a nice, modest job." "That's right, she just—" Maria waved her hand helplessly toward the luxurious hall, the beaming guests, the huge screens. "I didn't know what this was." "It's the most influential human rights organization in the state," the senator stated, his words falling like hammer blows. "Forbes has written about it. It's testified before Congress. Its work changes laws. And you, your family," he turned to me, and his eyes were filled with genuine astonishment. "They don't know?" "They never asked," I said simply. All the bitterness of the past years was in that simplicity. Maria's face flushed. We just thought." "You thought it was cute?" I finished softly for her. "A cute, frivolous hobby?" Her silence spoke louder than words. Senator Brennan stood abruptly, pushing back his chair with a deafening screech. "I need a minute." He walked away, clutching his phone convulsively. I watched him furiously type a message, his fingers literally pounding the letters onto the screen. Maria leaned toward me, her whisper filled with desperate pleading. "Sophia, you have to understand. We didn't mean to—" "Dad sent me a message today," I interrupted, my voice even, without a hint of reproach. "He told me not to embarrass you with my presence at the family dinner, so that my awkward work wouldn't ruin the impression on your important senator boyfriend." She turned as white as a sheet. "That same senator," I continued, "with whom I worked side by side for 3 years, who came today at my invitation to speak at my event." Oh my God. She covered her face with her hands, and her shoulders shook. The senator returned to the table. His jaw was clenched so tightly that white spots appeared on his cheekbones. "I just wrote to your father," he said, every word dripping with icy fury. "I asked him why he didn't mention that his daughter runs Chan. His response, verbatim, was, 'Sophia, she works for that children's charity. A nice girl, but nothing serious.'" A deathly silence fell over our table. Everyone heard. "I told him," the senator continued, his voice low and dangerous, taut as a string, "that I was at the Chan Gala, that his daughter Sophia was sitting next to me as hostess and honorary organizer, and that I was preparing to give a speech in honor of her outstanding leadership. He looked intently at Maria. And he said, "There must be some mistake. Sophia can't be that important." "Richard, please," Maria tried to intervene, but he didn't hear her. "Do you know what I wrote to him in the end?" His words now cut through the air, clear and relentless. That I worked with his daughter on 3 key pieces of legislation, that she's the most brilliant strategist I've ever met, that under her leadership, Chan manages a budget of almost $10 million and saves thousands of families, that his daughter has done more for this state than most politicians have done in their entire lives. Tears, blackened by mascara, streamed down Maria's face, silent and humiliating. "And I added," the senator finished, carefully, "that I'll have to reconsider my relationship with a family so blind to their own child." "Senator," I said quietly but firmly, "the program starts in 3 minutes." He sighed, a strangled sigh, and sank into a chair. "You're right. I'm sorry. This is your evening. I shouldn't have—" "It's all right," I lightly touched his arm. "But let's now focus on those for whom we're all gathered here. The children." He nodded, reaching for a glass of water, his fingers visibly shaking. "Sophia, I'm sorry. We didn't know," Maria whispered, her voice breaking. "I know you didn't know," I replied, and there was neither anger nor triumph in my words, only the endless, tired truth. That's the whole problem. At that moment, the lights in the hall dimmed softly. Our chairman of the board stepped onto the stage. The evening had begun. I rose to the microphone for the welcoming speech. I spoke of numbers that became destinies, about the 4,847 families we supported this year, about small victories that added up to a greater story of hope. A video appeared on the screen. A woman, her face worn by struggle, but her eyes ablaze. "Chan saved us," she said, her voice trembling. "They gave us back not only money, but also faith. While my son fought, they fought for us." There wasn't a single indifferent face in the room. Even Maria, clutching her handkerchief in her fist, looked at the screen, tears streaming down her cheeks again. Different ones this time. All evening, I caught her gaze on me, bewildered, tear-filled. Maria sat as if on coals, her mascara smeared and her hands shaking. Senator Brennan was polite, but a wall of ice had risen between them. All his warmth, all his attention now belonged to me and our common cause, which he spoke of with genuine passion. When it was time for him to speak, the room fell silent in respectful anticipation. He approached the podium, adjusted the microphone, and his gaze, heavy and significant, slowly swept the packed hall. "Good evening. I am honored to be here," he began, his voice deeper, more serious than usual. "But I must confess, I barely grasped the full significance of this moment." He gestured at me. 12 years ago, Sophia Torres began with a vision and a grant that would have seemed insignificant to others, a vision in which a sick child does not become a devastating sentence for a family. The room responded with restrained but warm applause. Over the years, she built more than just an organization. She built a foundation, the very foundation on which nearly 5,000 families now rely. She changed laws. And I testify, when she spoke before our committee, even the most hardened cynics forgot their cynicism. Her truth was stronger than any political game. He looked straight at me, and there wasn't a hint of formality in his gaze, only a profound respect I'd never seen before. She's the author of the Medical Debt Forgiveness Act. Her tenacity, her research, her refusal to give in when everyone else said impossible. Thanks to her, 3,200 families this year were able to breathe a sigh of relief and start their lives anew. The applause rose like the roar of an approaching tide. But today, something else struck me. His voice quieted, forcing everyone to listen. Today, I spoke to someone who had no idea the scale of what Sophia had created, someone who dismissed her work as sweet charity, someone who hadn't bothered to look beyond the curtain of their own prejudices. Maria, sitting next to him, seemed to be trying to fall through the back of her chair. "It got me thinking," the senator continued, his words now ringing throughout the room like both a verdict and a revelation. "How often do we, blinded by our notions of real success, overlook true titans? How often do we dismiss those who change the world without fanfare because their greatness isn't packaged in the glossy packaging we're accustomed to? He paused, letting the silence do its work. Sophia doesn't chase fame. She chases results. She doesn't build a personal brand. She builds systems of survival. And she doesn't need our recognition. But we must give it, because it's these quiet heroes who change the world. The applause exploded into a standing ovation. People rose from their seats. And today, by investing in Chan, I challenge each of you. His voice grew stronger again. Who are you overlooking? Who have you written off as insignificant? Because I guarantee it, among these people are those doing the most important work in the world. His gaze slid briefly over Maria's pale face, then returned to the audience. Don't make the same mistake I did. Don't allow brilliant minds to labor in the shadow of your pride. Don't confuse modesty with insignificance. He raised his glass. The audience fell silent. To Sophia Torres, and to all who do good without expecting applause, may we have the wisdom to recognize you, the courage to acknowledge you, and the humility to learn from you. The entire audience rose. 700 people gave a standing ovation. I stood and nodded, trying to keep my smile from wavering, even though everything inside me screamed with a strange, bitter, and liberating victory. The senator returned to the table. Maria was crying openly, her body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," he said quietly but clearly, his words leaving no room for argument. "But I can't be with a man so blind to the greatness in his own family. Who measures the value of other people's lives by such a paltry yardstick?" "Richard, Your things will be sent to you," he stood up. "Goodbye." He moved to the empty seat next to me. Maria, covering her face with her hands, ran out of the room, and the slamming of the heavy door sounded like the final chord. And at that moment, my phone started going crazy. The vibration was furious, incessant. "Dad, call me back immediately." "What was that?" "Mom, how could you hide something like this from us? We're in shock." "Carlos, sis, is this true? You're in charge of all this? It's enormous." "Aunt Teresa, your father just told me everything. I always knew you were special. Why didn't I say anything?" "Cousin Miguel, Sophia, is that you? I cited your research in my dissertation." I turned my phone face down. Calls and messages could wait. Now in front of me were living people whose support was real and tangible. The vice governor approached me, her gaze full of understanding, devoid of any pathos. An impressive speech. Family matters. They always find the most inopportune moment to remind you of themselves. "Unfortunately, that's true," I sighed. "Believe me, I know," she smiled softly. "My own family considered my career a nice political hobby for 10 years. People who don't ask questions don't deserve answers. You don't owe anyone reports simply by right of blood relationship." "Thank you," I said, and the thank you was as sincere as a sip of water after a long thirst. "Besides," she added in a businesslike tone, "your work speaks for itself. I've been reviewing Chan's budget proposals. Brilliant. Let's meet next week to discuss priorities." "My pleasure." As the evening drew to a close, the numbers on the screen shone like stars. $6.8 million, 700,000 over the target. Senator Brennan found me when the room was almost empty. "Sophia, I apologize again for that scene. It went beyond professional bounds." "You were telling the truth," I replied. "Sometimes she can be uncomfortable, but that doesn't make her any less valuable." "I broke up with Maria," he said bluntly, without preamble. "I can't be with someone whose worldview is so limited." "You don't have to justify yourself to me. But I want you to know," he looked at me with that directness that commanded respect, "your work matters. You matter. And I'm so sorry your family didn't see that." "Maybe they'll start now," I said quietly, looking at the dim screen displaying the totals. There was more truth in those numbers than in all the conversations we'd had over family dinner the previous night. I left the country club at 11:45. The night was cold and clear. I stood on the steps, gulping in the clean air, feeling a strange emptiness after the adrenaline rush. We'd raised almost $7 million. That meant new programs, lives saved. That was important. But the heaviness in my chest from the previous evening outweighed even that joy. The phone I finally pulled out of my purse felt like an angry hornet. 63 missed calls, 127 messages. I scrolled through them without reading them until I came across a message from James. "Boss, you're trending. The senator's speech has blown the internet away. 4.2 million views." I opened the app. The video of his speech was everywhere. Comments rained down like hail, each one a fresh blow to the already shattered mirror of family illusions. "Karma," some wrote. "This is what it's like not seeing your child," others echoed. I was being picked apart, praised, made into a symbol. It was deafening and unbearable. I turned off my phone. In the car, in my quiet driveway, I just sat in the dark, listening to the engine cool. And then the screen lit up again. "Dad." I picked up the phone, not out of politeness, out of a need to put an end to this. "Sophia," his voice was taut as a string, "we need to figure out why you kept us in the dark." "No, Dad," I replied, my voice weary but firm. "We need to figure out why you never cared. In 12 years, how many times have you asked me what I really do? How many times have you asked about the budget, about the people, about the laws we're changing?" The silence on the line was thick and helpless. "I have 43 employees," I continued, and the numbers that had always been my pride now sounded like accusations. 5 offices across the state, 6 laws amended, 4,847 families last year. I testified before Congress, Dad, twice. You never mentioned that. You never asked. That's the difference." I took a deep breath, feeling the bitterness that had been suffocating me for years finally find its release. "Today you wrote to me asking me not to embarrass you in front of Maria's boyfriend. Do you understand what that means? You were ashamed of me, of your daughter who was just in the background, not as brilliant as Maria, not as noticeable as Carlos, just Sophia." "That's not true." Pain broke through his voice, but it couldn't hurt me anymore. "Then name 3 things about my life in the last 5 years. 3 things you learned because you were curious, not because someone told you over dinner." The silence stretched. I heard his heavy breathing into the phone. The seconds stretched into a minute. That was enough. "That's it," I said quietly. "I don't need you to be proud of me now that it's all over Twitter. I needed you to see me when I was a nobody, just your daughter who believed in her craft." "I'm sorry," his voice wavered, sounding genuinely broken for the first time in years. "Mija, we let you down." "Yes," I agreed without malice, "but I still built what I believed in, without your support, and I'm proud of it. Can we fix this?" There was a plea in his words, but I couldn't allow myself to soften. Not now. "I don't know, maybe, but not today, not because you're ashamed or embarrassed. When you're ready to see me as a person, not some unexpected, successful daughter, then we'll talk." "How will I know when I'm ready?" "You won't understand. I will. But start with Chan's annual report. It's on the website. Read it. And if after that you're truly interested, call. Not to apologize, to talk." "I'll read it today." "We'll see," I said, and hung up. The next morning, a call woke me. Maria. I stared at the vibrating screen, counting the rings, and only answered on the 4th. Her voice was tattered with tears and anger. "He left me, Sophia. He said he couldn't be with someone who treated his sister like that. Are you happy? Is this all you wanted?" I laughed. It was a dry, joyless sound. "I wanted to throw a successful charity event, Maria. Everything that happened next is the consequence of your own decisions. You didn't bother to get to know me for 12 years. You asked my father to disinvite me so I wouldn't disgrace you. And now you blame me for the cracks in your world, built on neglect?" Sobs came over the phone, angry, powerless. "I didn't know that all this was so serious." Because you didn't ask. My voice finally broke, bursting out with all the pent-up pain. You thought you knew. You thought my life was a sweet, insignificant hobby, and when the truth confronted you, it was easier for you to blame me than to admit your own arrogance. She cried, and her sobs betrayed an unbearable, childish resentment at the world's injustice. I lost him because of this, she breathed, and those words contained her entire universe, shattered in an instant. For her, tragedy was measured in a single breakup. My 12 years of silence, however, never felt like a loss to her. No, Maria. My voice was quiet but inexorable. You didn't lose him because of me. You lost him because of who you are. Because, seeing my accomplishments, you felt no pride. You felt resentment at having made a mistake. Richard saw that, and he made a choice. And you're just going to let my relationship fall apart? Her voice rang with childish resentment, demanding that the world correct her mistakes for her. Saving your relationship isn't my job, Maria, I said, and there was a release in those words. Sugarcoating your reality isn't my job, and downplaying my successes to make you feel more comfortable in my disdain is definitely not my job. I exhaled, trying to soften my tone, but not the meaning. And telling you the truth is my job. You have a choice. You can be angry at me for silently building my business, or you can ask yourself why all these years you needed to make me smaller to feel bigger. I did, I interrupted her gently. Every time I called it my little charity, every time she changed the subject the moment I mentioned work, every time she introduced me with her special, condescending tone. And this is my sister. She works in the nonprofit sector. That tone said it all. A heavy, tear-soaked silence hung on the other end of the line. I'll see a therapist, she finally exhaled. Breaking up with Richard, it showed me I don't like who I've become. That's a good step, Maria, sincerely. Can we grab coffee sometime, when I've sorted myself out a bit? I considered. The old desire, for everything to go back to how it used to be, for the family to be whole, was warring with a new, solid truth about myself. Maybe, in a few months, when you're going to therapy for yourself, not to fix your relationship with me or get Richard back. When you're ready to see me not as a little sister to be dominated by, but as an equal. Okay, she whispered. Okay. 3 weeks passed. 3 weeks of silence, broken only by business calls and messages from admiring colleagues. And then my father called. Sophia, I read your annual report, cover to cover. Then I found articles in Forbes, The Washington Post, transcripts of your speeches to Congress. His voice wavered. Now I understand why you're angry and why you're keeping your distance. But I also realized something else. I don't know you. That woman who talks about politics and systemic change, I don't know her. No, I agreed. I don't. I'd like to meet you, if you'll let me. What's changed, Dad? Just 3 weeks ago, you asked me to stay home so as not to disgrace the family. I watched Senator Brennan's speech, not just a snippet, but the whole thing. And when he talked about those who are rejected while they change the world, he paused, and in the silence, I heard a suppressed sigh. I saw myself. I saw what we've done. This is the beginning. Can we meet, just the two of us? No excuses, no apologies, just coffee and conversation. I looked at my computer screen where a fund had been opened for young social entrepreneurs, those whose families didn't understand them. The email I'd sent to each of them floated back to me. Build what matters, make them see. Well, they're finally watching. An hour, I said. Next Sunday, the coffee shop on 5th Street. Thank you, Midja. Don't thank me yet, Dad. This won't be easy for either of us. I know, but you're worth going through this. On Sunday morning, I arrived early. I ordered an oat latte and sat by the window, watching the city slowly awaken. My father arrived on the dot. He seemed smaller, somehow hunched over, unsure of his movements. Thank you for coming, he said, sitting down. Answer me honestly, I began, preventing the conversation from veering off into safer waters. When did you realize you didn't know me? He was silent for a long moment, his fingers fiddling with his paper cup. When I called the Chan office to clarify something about a report, the secretary asked what it was about. I said, I'm her father, and there was a note of confusion in her voice. She said, Ms. Torres values working with families very highly. I'm sure she'd be happy to discuss Chan's mission with you. His voice broke. She didn't know who I was, Sophia. Your secretary didn't know you had a father. Because you never brought us into the office. You never talked about us. We weren't part of that life. You weren't part of that because you never asked to be let in. I know, he looked down, but it still hurt to realize that my daughter had built an entire world in which I wasn't even a footnote. And what was it like for me, Dad? I asked, my voice shaking, betraying the pain I'd been feeling. Sitting at every Sunday dinner, listening to you discuss Maria's boyfriend's new Porsche or Carlos's TV contract, and hearing you whisper to Mom, maybe we should give Sophia some rent money. I thought I was helping. I thought I was supporting. You were being condescending. It makes a world of difference. I sipped my latte, letting the words seep into the silence between us. I bought a townhouse with cash 4 years ago, Dad. My salary is public information. I've been financially independent for 7 years, and you still offered to pay my rent. His face twisted with shame and insight. Because I didn't ask, I assumed. I assumed your silence was a sign of failure. Senator Brennan talked about this in his speech, about quiet heroes. He did, my father nodded, and he called me. Last week, he said that if I didn't mend my relationship with you, I'd regret it for the rest of my life, that you were one of the most remarkable people he'd ever worked with, and that I was blind to it. I felt uneasy. He shouldn't have done that. Perhaps, but I'm grateful. He reached across the table, his hand hovering a centimeter from mine, hesitant to touch. Sophia, I don't know how to make up for 12 years of neglect, but I want to learn. I want to get to know the woman who built Chan, who changes laws, who saves families. But that's not all of me, Dad, I said quietly. It's just a part. I know, he smiled, and for the first time in many years, there was no condescension in that smile, but humility and a desire to understand. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know what you like, what you read, what you dream about, who your friends are. I don't know what makes my own daughter laugh. I sipped my coffee, letting the words settle in the silence between us. It felt vulnerable, sharing these tiny details that made me who I was. I collect vintage campaign buttons, I finally said, and it sounded like a confession. I have over 300 of them, the oldest from 1896. I know every line of dialogue from the West Wing by heart. I foster old dogs from shelters. And I'm learning to play the piano. I'm terrible at it, by the way, but I love it. My father looked at me, and in his tear-filled eyes, there was not only remorse, but also amazement, as if he were seeing the outline of a whole new continent for the first time in the dim light. I didn't know any of this. You didn't ask, I confirmed softly. But here I am, telling you now. This is all I can give you, a chance to start learning. Not the daughter you thought didn't live up to expectations. Not a sudden, successful surprise. Just me. I accept this chance, he whispered, gratefully. Any bit you care to share? We sat for 2 hours. I talked not only about Chan's strategic plans, but also about the 3-legged dog named Buddy, who now lives with me, and about how ridiculously out of tune I was learning Fury Lease. He, in turn, spoke of his regrets, his fear of old age, the slow, painful realization that all his life he'd valued the wrong things that were too loud. It wasn't forgiveness, the scars were too fresh. But it was a bridge, fragile and new, thrown across the chasm of misunderstanding. 6 months later, we were celebrating Chan's 13th anniversary. We'd just won a 12 million ruble government contract to help rural communities. Our office was bustling with excitement and happiness. Staff, volunteers, the families we'd saved. And in the corner, a little awkwardly, but heartily chatting with Martina, the accountant, stood my parents. My father had read everything I'd sent. He'd attended 2 of my speeches. Now he was helping us with the donor database, displaying an unexpected talent for systematization. My mother, dusting off her long-ago social work degree, was leading a support group for our families. Maria was still seeing a therapist. Our rare coffee meetings were tense, but honest. Carlos, to my surprise, wrote a poignant column about quiet leadership, using me as an example. But the most important moment came when a woman with kind, tired eyes approached me. "Ms. Torres, you probably don't remember me. You personally called me last year when Anya was in the hospital. You helped me fill out the paperwork. You saved our house from being sold." We hugged, and her tears were purest gratitude. My father, standing nearby, saw everything. When she walked away, he quietly said, "Do you do this often? Call me personally?" "When I can. That's exactly what this whole thing was about, to help people the way I wish someone had helped me. Understand that your value doesn't depend on someone else's attention." "I'm so proud of you, Midja." "Thank you, Dad." I put my hand on his shoulder. "But I didn't build this for your pride. I built it for them, for myself. Your pride, it's a nice bonus, but not the goal." He nodded, and his smile held both sadness and finally found clarity. "I know. That's exactly why I'm proud. Because you became this way, without my approval, in spite of it." A year later, I was having coffee with Senator Brennan, discussing a new bill. "I saw Maria got engaged," he noted cautiously, "to a technologist. Timothy, he's a good man. He doesn't play her games. He makes her laugh. And before he asked anything about Maria, he asked me 30 questions about my work. That's when I knew he was one of us." The senator smiled. "And in the family?" "Better. Slowly, but better. Dad volunteers. Mom leads a support group. Carlos has changed his rhetoric. And Maria? She searched for 3 months to find a McKinley-era pin for my collection. That means something." "That's growth." "Yes." I sipped my coffee, feeling a long-forgotten lightness. "But you know what's most important? I don't need their approval anymore. Chan works. Families are getting help. I've built something that matters. Their belated recognition can't add or subtract from that." "Don't let brilliant people work in obscurity," he quietly quoted his own speech. "People still write to me about it. People who were overlooked. Stories that finally broke through. And that's good. Let them talk. Because silence is not synonymous with emptiness. And meaningful work is more important than any applause." He raised his cup. "To the quiet heroes." I clinked mine with his. "To those who get things done, whether they're seen or not." Because ultimately, victory wasn't about a viral speech, a family epiphany, or a public breakup. Victory was about the 4,847 families who were able to breathe a sigh of relief, about laws that were changed, about children's laughter that wasn't drowned out by medical bills, about homes that weren't foreclosed. I built something that matters, while everyone thought I was just a sweet charity worker. And if I had to start over, I'd repeat every step, without a doubt.